We've been doing a survey of Joshua. We've been kind of stopping at various points along the way. We've not been doing the verse by verse or even chapter by chapter. We're going to skip ahead even further today to chapter 14 of Joshua. We're going to take in the story of Caleb and his request for specific lands as his inheritance. This story really it's just always fascinated me. I have always been, Caleb's kind of my guy. I just really admire this man, what we see of him, at least in Scripture. I just really admire this man for his what?
What chapter in Joshua?
14. I just admire this man for his relationship that he has with God. Even at this stage, there's no Jesus Christ that they know of. All they know is what Moses has told them, and all they know is the law. And here's Caleb, and we'll see kind of why I admire him the way I do. He relies on God's promises. The specific land that he requested to be given him, he requested a specific piece of the land. He didn't just say, okay, now I'm ready for an inheritance, Joshua, tell me what I can do. He requested a specific place. And we see the faith of Caleb here. I think that's the story. We see the faith of Caleb. Faith not in Joshua, faith not in Moses, but faith in God who promises and keeps his promises. First 5 verses of this chapter 14, kind of summarize the giving of the land of Canaan on the west side of the Jordan. That's between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. That's the part of Israel that we normally think of when we look and we see the maps of Israel. Those first 5 verses kind of summarize the giving of that part of the land. It was during this time of apportioning this land out to Judah in particular. Judah was the main tribe in particular here. Since Caleb was of the tribe of Judah, Caleb went to Joshua during this apportioning time, during the time that Joshua was telling Judah what portions of the land that they could have. Caleb, being a member of the Judean tribe, went to Joshua. And instead of saying, okay, Joshua, what is the place where you want me to go and my family? Caleb asked for a specific part of the territory that was to the south of Jerusalem, about 25 miles or so. And it was hill country, and Caleb had this specific spot in mind. I have a sneaking hunch that Caleb had been there 40 some years before, as a younger man, as one of the 12 spies. I really believe that he had been in this part before, and once he got into the land as a conqueror, he wanted that particular part of the land. And if you recall history, Caleb and Joshua were 2 spies out of the 12 40 some years ago. You doing okay, Joellen?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
They spied out the land. They brought back a report. That story is told way back in Numbers 13. But if you recall, Caleb and Joshua were the only 2 out of those 12 who said, we can go in and take this land. God would deliver the land into their hands. The other 10 said that the inhabitants there were too many people there. They were strong. They lived in fortified cities. And furthermore, they found out that many of the people who lived, at least in the spot where Caleb is going to eventually settle, and in the southern part of the promised land, were descendants of a guy named Anak, A-N-A-K, I believe that's how you say it. And they said that they were like grasshoppers in their sight. So evidently this was a race or an ethnicity of people who, for whatever reason, were taller, larger, bigger, somehow or another, than the Israelite people were. Now, I don't know how much more. I don't know if they were Goliath in stature. And we don't even know for sure how big Goliath was, because the numbers that are translated in the Old Testament sometimes aren't just real accurate. And so I mean, I've always heard that Goliath was 9 feet tall. I find that difficult to believe. Could be, but numbers are translated. It's kind of weird how they do that, and not everybody agrees on certain numbers. So I don't know how it was, but the spies anyway said, these guys, these armies, these people, you know, it's just like a basketball team of 7-footers playing a basketball team of 5.5-footers, you know, that kind of thing. Now that you can kind of get in your head and you can kind of understand. And my guess is that, and the guess of many of the people who do research on this kind of thing, most people in that day and age weren't all that tall compared to what we are today. If you were in the 5 to 5.5 foot range back then, you were doing pretty good. So, and I don't know how they know that. I don't know if they've dug up bones or I don't know what they've done. So if there were people that were 6 feet, 6.5 feet tall, whatever, that would be a pretty good difference, and I could see how they might, okay, we can't do this type thing. And if you recall the story in Numbers 13, the people of Israel even went to the point of trying to stone, to kill Joshua and Caleb for their report, saying that they could take the land. Only the appearance of God himself, if you read the story, only the appearance of God himself in the tent of meeting stopped that stoning. Moses had to intercede on behalf of the people to prevent God from wiping them out totally and making a great nation out of Moses and his descendants. In fact, God actually said that, you know, get away, Moses, I'm going to wipe everybody out, and I'm going to make you and your descendants a great nation. And Moses then interceded and said, you know, please don't do that, you know. And it was here then that God relented with that, and then he said, and he swore, it says, by himself, that none of those who rebelled would see the promised land. And it was after that that the people wandered in the wilderness for 40-some years. That only Joshua and Caleb would be able to go into the promised land because they were the only two who said, we can take this, God's going to give it into our hands, we have faith in God, this is going to work, we're going to be able to do this. And so then the people went into the wilderness, everyone except Joshua and Caleb, what was it, everyone over 20 years old, I think, if I remember right, died except for Joshua and Caleb. And it was then those younger generations that went into the promised land. Question. If you would have been one of the spies, would you have voted with Joshua and Caleb, or would you have voted with the other 10? Not knowing the outcome, not having read the Old Testament, what would you have done? It's a great land. There's lots of stuff growing there. It's well cared for. It's well watered. You know, they got everything they need. But man, these people's armies, they're something else. We're never going to be able to, you know, we're never going to be able to take these. We only have these spears and short swords. We can't do anything with this. Would you have gone with Joshua and Caleb? Would you have gone with the 10? And I'll just tell you, I would have gone with the 10.
I would too.
I would have gone with the 10, knowing what little I know about what the spies saw. I don't think that I could have been a Joshua or a Caleb. And I think that I would not have seen the promised land 40 years later.
I done that either. I think I would have gone with that. And she said vote with 10. I think that's what I would have done.
Why would you have gone with the 10, Joe Ellen?
Because they know what they're doing. And I trust them.
The majority rules?
Well, I think that's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's There's 10 of us that don't, I mean, there's only 2 of these knotheads over here that think we can do this. And the rest of us,
I think I would have followed what they wanted me to do.
what would you have done?
It would be interesting to know how they were selected to go be the spies. Because if they were just selected because they were like manly men, you know, they were like people that you would think
Right.
would be spies.
Warriors or
Yeah.
some kind of, yeah.
Yeah, they may not have been godly men. And so, I mean, Joshua and Caleb clearly were godly men and were selected for this task, but you don't know about those other 10
The other
guys.
10.
I mean, and it's just like Curtis was saying this morning, you know, it didn't matter what miracles God did for these people. You know, they turned right around right after and started grumbling. I mean, this is just another example of it. You know, he brought them out of captivity. He's destroyed Pharaoh's army in front of them.
Right.
He walked them across, you know, a river that he had the water piled up on either side.
And I'm doing this for a reason. I'm not ignoring you.
And you know, now they finally get to the point where, you know, God has promised them that they're going to have this land, and still 10 of them come back and they just say, we can't do that.
We can't do that.
Yeah, we can't do that. So, it is interesting because they obviously swayed the people when they did it. I mean, it wasn't just like ones and twos that said, oh, okay, well, maybe we ought not go in there. It was all the people.
And you know, Pat, you might be right with that. These people, these guys that were a part of that might have been, how would I say it, public figures in their tribes or people with some stature who were able to persuade the people, look, we can't do this. They weren't just maybe ordinary Joes that nobody knew. And you're right. Curtis said, you know, complain. And the reason I looked this up, I was watching one of those East Idaho News videos yesterday evening. And a woman had just lost her husband. She had been caring for him through 10 years of chronic illness. Unable to work. He got cancer during the last stages of that and died. And she also was working. She was also caring for their 5 kids during this time. And so Secret Santa, and she couldn't afford the funeral service. The funeral home agreed to put her on payments. And so Secret Santa came in the form of the East Idaho News team just a few days after the funeral. He paid for the funeral service. They got, I think, $3,000 in gift cards for the grocery store and a $5,000 cashier's check just to kind of help them through. I also like to look at the comments below these videos. If you watch YouTube videos, you know people are able sometimes to put comments. The top comment, the first comment below this video. This woman says, and I'm not sure I can even get through this short comment because I relate to it so well. I feel dumb and ashamed when I complain about insignificant things. They just suffered a terrible loss. May our Heavenly Father watch over and be with this family, give them comfort and love. And my Thursday Thought video this coming Thursday is going to be an expansion of this comment. I feel dumb and ashamed. And I do. You know, we gripe about the smallest things. We complain about, I don't know, whatever. We complain if the water for our coffee isn't hot enough, and we complain about the weather that's coming in, or the weather we're having, or the dry, or, you know, I don't know. We just complain about so much. And if you really stop and think about it, and just like Curtis was saying this morning, I mean, we should at times feel dumb and ashamed because of our complaining and lack of gratitude.
You know, there's another side of this though, Jay. We talk about the 10 spies, but one of the challenges that Joshua made on that mountain the day he was going to die was, I stand before you as a man in integrity. I challenge you to look at your past. These were 600,000 people plus,
Yeah.
maybe 1 million. And kind of like Pat said, this isn't 40 years after they crossed the Jordan River.
Right.
This is within the lifespan of most everybody standing there, or not at the Jordan River, over at the Red Sea.
Right.
These are people whose lifespan have seen the Red Sea, have seen the water from the rock.
Right. Those that were under 20 years old. Yeah.
Have seen, Joshua was 40 years old. I don't think it was a 20-year journey from Egypt to Canaan. And so from the other side of it, these are people who have seen God working in miraculous ways.
Okay, you're talking about when the 12 spies went in the first time.
That's where we are.
Yeah, right.
That's where we are right here.
Okay, I was ahead of you in my brain, so I had to kind of back up a little
That's where
bit.
Caleb and Joshua were,
Right,
and they were ready, because after that, they are condemned to 40 years
Right.
of wandering in the
Right.
wilderness. So these are people that are standing there, and they listen to these 10 guys who say, we can't do it. And you've got 2 guys standing there saying, yes, we can, because we've got God on our side. And, you know, when you talk about, I don't know the faith or whatever of this individual you were talking about there, but there's some of the rest of us that have gone through some, in our lifespans, we go through some faith experiences, and we can look back and we can see, how did I react, and how did God work in my life when this happened,
I think you've had a few of those, haven't you, Bill?
and when this happened. And so we look at the children of Israel here, they're not listening to 10 guys, they're rejecting God.
Right.
And when Caleb was standing up as that man of God, and Joshua was standing up as those men of God, they were standing on God's side. The other 10 were standing on, hey, we're not big enough and strong enough, and we can't do that. And of course, throughout their history, it's just like Israel do this over and over and over. Sometimes we have a tendency to do the same thing.
Right,
over and over.
right.
But there are we. Which side do we stand on?
And as you said at the beginning, these 10 guys had seen God work. They saw him work every day with the manna. They saw him work in getting water in the desert. They saw him work with the crossing of the Red Sea. They saw him work in the pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire, for Pete's sake. That was a daily, to me, that was a daily reminder,
Yeah.
you know.
For me, I hope my faith would have been strong enough that I would say I would have been on Caleb and Joshua's side, not on the 10 side.
I don't know that I would have been, Bill, even at that.
One of the things that just kind of struck me as you were talking about that is we had a daily reminder. Well, that may have become old hat. It's just, well, but that's just the way it is. you know?
It's normal,
It's normal.
just the way it is.
Just, we're thinking of it being, oh my gosh, this is, an extraordinary event. Well, they're like, well, this is just what happens every day. I mean,
Yeah, I get it.
Play it.
I get it. But isn't that why we take for granted what we have? You know, the water always comes out of the tap.
Right.
The light always comes on. The car always, well, most of the time starts. You know, there's gas in the tank. There's whatever. It's normal. It's just,
Right. I mean, I don't know, desensitized is the word, but it's just not.
it's just like these flat screens out here. The first week or two or three, it's going to be wonderful, and after that, it's going to become normal, even though there is, and I say this not literally, even though there is magic and wizardry in the hardware and software that keeps on working. You know, it's just going to become, yeah, okay.
The thing of it is, the 12 spies all came back with the same report.
Right, they did.
All came back with the same.
They did.
And this is beautiful land, it's prosperous,
Right.
got all of these wonderful things,
Got everything we need.
but only 2 of them said, yeah, with God on our side, we can do this. And the question comes to us, as we read this story, have we been a Caleb? Caleb or Joshua, or have we been one of the others?
And you know, I didn't even get one page done of this lesson. I'm going to finish this first page. After I ask you the question, what would you have done? Would you have been one of the 10 or one of the 2? After these 40-some years, I've got down here, Caleb comes to Joshua. And he says this, you know the word which the Lord spoke to Moses, the man of God, concerning you and me, he's talking to Joshua, concerning you and me in Kadesh Barnea. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land, and I brought word back to him as it was in my heart. So Caleb opens his speech here. We got a couple of minutes. Caleb opens his speech here to Joshua with a recollection of God's words to Moses about Joshua and him some 40 years ago. God said that Caleb had a different spirit and followed me fully in Numbers 14:24. And that was why Caleb was going to enter the land of promise along with Joshua, rather than everybody else. Now Caleb is 80 years old, thereabouts. Even in those days, when people tended to live longer, 80 years old was getting up in years. It would have been not inappropriate for Caleb to have taken the easy road and just allow others to do most of the fighting and cleansing of the land. As a patriarch, Caleb could have set aside his weapons of war and benefited from the work of others in his family. He didn't do that. But we go on with Caleb's speech. Nevertheless, my brethren who went up with me made the heart of the people melt with fear, but I followed the Lord my God fully. So Moses swore on that day, saying, surely the land on which your foot is trodden will be an inheritance to you and to your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God fully. Now behold, the Lord has let me live, Caleb says, just as he spoke these 45 years from the time that the Lord spoke this word to Moses when Israel walked in the wilderness, and now behold, I'm 85 years old today. We're going to stop there with Caleb being 85. Because there's something he says following this that I really need to take to heart as well. And I want to get into that a little bit next week. Thank you for being here. We will continue this next week. I didn't expect to have to do this over 2 weeks, but we'll do this over 2 weeks. Thank you.